You're listening to Friday Live on Nebraska Public Media. Support for programming comes from The Ross. Opening tonight is La Grazia, starring Tony Savito, as an outgoing Italian president who must navigate a moral crossroad in this sweeping exploration of love, duty, and personal freedom. Continuing is No Other Choice, a black comedy of an unemployed man setting out to secure a job by eliminating his competition. TheRoss.org.
The next concert on the Abend Music series at First Plymouth Church in Lincoln features an ensemble that has set the gold standard for choral singing for more than a century. That is the St. Olaf Choir, which will perform tomorrow at 7 p.m. Anton Armstrong is in his 36th year with the choir, which means he is now the longest tenured conductor in the group's history. Welcome to Friday Live.
Thank you so much, Geneva. It's good to be with you and your listeners.
So a college in Northfield, Minnesota, for those who don't know, founded by Norwegian American Lutherans with students coming and going year after year. What elements keep the choir going and hold the choir to that gold standard that I referenced?
Well, you know, there have only been 4 of us in 114 years as conductors. And as you just stated, I am now the longest serving conductor. This is my 36th year. And the other thing is that each of the conductors had sung under the previous conductor. So Efmelius Chris Johnson was a Norwegian immigrant who formally started the music program and the music department here in 1903. His son Olaf succeeded him, but had sung under his father as a student at St. Olaf, and came and had the choir from 1941 until 1968. And then his student, Kenneth Jennings, assumed the helm of the choir in 1968 until 1990. I sang under the St. Olaf choir under Jennings. We've been part of a thread, but each conductor has opened up a new dimension to programming, to the way the choir sings. But we've held to those high standards that the founder first initiated when he started the choir, which is, first of all, when Efmelius started this choir in 1912, he brought about a new paradigm in choral singing, which was unaccompanied, primarily sacred choral music. It was all sacred choral music sung by the choir under the 2 Chris Johnsons. Dr. Jennings and I have expanded that repertoire to include works with instruments, non-religious works, and certainly during my 36 years, I've expanded the repertoire to include a much more global repertoire as well. But it's been understanding that foundation upon which it was held and founded, and which we've held to, but always trying to meet the needs of the times that we're in. That is certainly very true for this program. When we talk about that more, I'll explain that.
Yeah. You just led me right into the next question, which was about this program. What is the choir performing tomorrow?
I always like to do a breadth of repertoire. I know some of my younger colleagues don't like to do as much from Western canon. I still do a fair amount from Western canon, but I also do music that includes voices that have been marginalized over the past, whether those are voices of female composers, of people of color. And so you will hear the opening section begins with wonderful choral music from the Western canon by William Byrd and Heinrich Schütz, Hubert Parry, and Edward Elgar. But it also will include music later in the program by composers from Latin America, music from our own country by African-American composers, Margaret Bonds and Undine Smith Moore, Mari Valverde, a contemporary living composer, and several more contemporary living composers. I guess what I want to maybe speak to most at this point is our third section, which each section has a different title to give a focus to the listener. But this section is We Sing of Compassion and Justice. The nice thing about this tour is that I have one of my colleagues, James Bobb, who is one of the college organ professors, and he's the cantor to our student congregation. We are doing several pieces with the organ, but this also allows me to invite the audience to sing. And they'll get to do that actually twice in this concert, once in the second section. But we open with a hymn that I think will be very well known to many people, All Creatures Worship God Most High, but a more contemporary text that speaks about people suffering, people who are in pain. The second piece in that is a piece I've now done since 2018. And other than Beautiful Savior, which is our signature piece, it's the only time I've repeated a piece like that. But it's called When Memory Fades. And it deals, the text by Mary Ellen Bringle, a wonderful theologian. Any of us who have had to deal with loved ones who've had Alzheimer's or dementia. And I've repeated this because every time I do this, I will turn to the audience. I'll do this in Lincoln. How many of you have or now are currently dealing with loved ones or friends with this? You would be amazed in the number of hands that go up. And it's still one of the most spoken pieces after a concert that I hear about. And that's part of the compassion. But then I move into several pieces now that talk about, I think, the condition that many of us find ourselves in. Certainly, we are 40 minutes south of Minneapolis, St. Paul. But literally next door to where I live, there is a Fairfield Inn. And last night at 11:30, there were demonstrations right in front of that because there were ICE agents being housed there. So the piece that follows is a piece that your own Tom Trenny wrote, and actually he dedicated to me, but I didn't know he had written the piece, or I'd forgotten. And so about a year and a half ago, when I was there conducting the Abend music concert series, the work that Tom wrote for me is entitled, God Wouldn't Bring You This Far to Leave You. No height, nor depth, nor anything else can separate us from the love that God will show. And I think we need to know that now, because right now, for people of faith, I think God feels silent in these times. But it's an affirmation he brings up in that text, the characters who have suffered and persecuted through time, but God doesn't leave them. Then the piece that follows that is movement from the Margabon's Credo, and it's, I believe, in the Prince of Peace. The Credo, the text that she set, was written by W.E.B. Du Bois in 1904. W.E.B. Du Bois is one of the founders of many things, but certainly of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And this text is, I believe in the Prince of Peace. I believe that war is murder. I believe that armies and navies are at bottom the tinsel and braggadocio of oppression and wrong. And I believe that the wicked conquest of weaker and darker nations by nations whiter and stronger but foreshadows the death of that strength. 1904. And as I've done these pieces with my students, and they come from a wide range of beliefs and political, religious, and everything. But as we were about to enter into our pre-concert the last weekend in January, literally that Saturday concert, we heard that this young man who was the nurse in the VA hospital was shot, maybe 20 minutes from where we were. The next piece, though, that really has been hitting is a very simple piece called Hope Lingers On. And the text reads, my mother, when love is gone, my father, when peace is gone, my sister, when equality is gone, my love, when honor is gone, my country, when justice is gone, I will not hate and I will not fear. In our darkest hour, hope lingers on. There was silence at both of those concerts. And on the second concert on Sunday, the audience leapt to their feet. And I know, as we come through, you live in a town with a wonderful university. And I know there'll be a wide range of thought and belief in that room that night. I simply hope that the people will hear this with open minds and open hearts. This has nothing to do with political affiliation. It's how you treat other human beings. And the final piece in this set is by a former member of this choir, graduate student of college, Mari Valverde. And she took a text by J. Patrick Lewis, and the title is When Thunder Comes. And as I read it to you, it's about civil rights leaders, but not about Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King Jr. And it starts out, the poor and dispossessed take up the drums for civil rights. Freedoms to think and speak, petition, pray, and vote. When thunder comes, the civil righteous are finished being meek. And then she describes these four people, why Sylvia Mendez bet against long odds. Sylvia Mendez was trying to bring integration to the Los Angeles schools in the 1960s. How Harvey Milk turned hatred on its head. Maybe the most famous of these people, the first openly gay council person in San Francisco. While Helen Shea railed against tin gods, an essayist, a poet who won many prizes, but because of her sexual orientation, was also pushed back. And then how freedom summer soldiers faced the dread. I knew about the Freedom Riders, but this was a civic group in the middle 60s that went down for voting rights and to help teach children who were being disenfranchised by education in the South. How freedom summer soldiers faced the dread are tales of thunder that I hope to tell from my thin bag of verse for you to hear in miniature, like ringing a small bell. And no, a million bells can drown out fear, for history was mute witness when such crimes discolored and discredited our times. It's a powerful section. I'm not naive. We are in very strong states that are often said to be red states. I'm not trying to come to create political havoc. What I am doing, I think music, especially choral music, because of our text, has always been, we have been called upon to be priests and prophets. Priests in times of comfort, consolation, healing, but prophets to often say what can't always be said. And in these 36 years, I've always felt that the message of the choir is one of hope, of one of love and compassion. But I don't think I've ever felt so powerfully moved that the message we have is vitally needed today. I know some people will come because they like choral music, and this choir is singing like a stellar choir already. So I think they'll be impressed by the beauty of their sound, all the things that you want from great ensemble singing. But I witnessed this in these first two concerts where their souls touch the souls of the listeners. And so I hope, sure, if people are entertained, that's wonderful. But I hope they go out transformed and at least thinking again. Maybe not just believing one source of news, but believing that what we do, we have to be better people to one another. I am a child of an immigrant. My father didn't come to this country until he was 18 from the British West Indies. And we were raised in a home that people said, don't expect anybody to give you anything. You need to earn everything. And if you expect people to give you respect, you must give that in return. And as a man of color, I was also told, you don't judge. You don't want other people to judge you by the outside of how you look, but by the content of your mind and heart. And that's how I've tried to live my life. And so when I see the type of treatment that people are getting, sometimes just because of the color of their skin or what's believed to be their nationality, it breaks my heart because that's not what the America that I grew up understanding. And I grew up as a kid in the 60s and 70s, I was a little kid when President Kennedy was shot, when Bobby Kennedy, when Dr. King. I started college right as Richard Nixon was resigning. It wasn't that times we didn't have turbulent times, but we were still better people. I think of Jimmy Carter's funeral, and he and Gerald Ford, who at one point were political opponents, but they had agreed to speak, whichever one lasted longer would speak at the other one's service, right? And Jerry Ford knew Jimmy was going to outlive him. So his son, Stephen, read the letter that President Ford had written before. He said, to my distinguished opponent, and now to my dear friend. That's the country that I grew up in. And now I see this country just being pulled apart. And again, this is not a concert that preaches politics. It does not. But it is a concert to hopefully open people's minds and hearts to really think about how you do, and as one of the basic tenets of my faith, what you do to the least of these, you do unto me. So I hope this concert will bring light into a very dark world right now. I hope it will bring how we need to treat one another, and that we bring back love and compassion. And that will give us the hope and the light to break through this darkness.
I'm wondering, in just a short amount of time, if you could also just put a twist on this and speak to, I've seen this question asked time and time again when there have been terrible things in the news, when people are downtrodden, when people are depressed, they're struggling. Why put energy, if you will, or invest in making art and music when maybe there's something else that we could or should be doing? Why make music?
I wish I knew you were going to ask me that question, because there's a famous quote by Leonard Bernstein, which he offered after President Kennedy's assassination. And I'm not going to pull it back enough to give it due justice. But I think music, art, but especially music, has a way of transcending the soul and lifting us up to another and a higher place. And it doesn't necessarily be classical. We are doing classical choral music, but you will find music from a Latin background. You'll find music from African Americans who lived in tribulation and yet had hope for the future. And that's how this concert ends. It ends with a hope and a look for how do we serve better, and how do we live with honor, and how do we live with compassion and love.
My guest here is Anton Armstrong. He will be leading the St. Olaf Choir on tomorrow's Abend Music concert in Lincoln. That concert is at 7 p.m. Thank you so much for your time and for bringing your choir back to Nebraska.
Well, thank you. I'm very grateful for Tom Turney's invitation to be part of the Abend Music concert series.
Find more details about this performance on the Friday Live page. Our website is nebraskapublicmedia.org.
You're listening to Friday Live. Poet Maria Nazos is in the studio with us right now, and she'll be reading poems from her forthcoming collection, Pulse.
Thank you so very much.
Of course.
I'm going to start with the first poem, and it's a shout out to Nebraska. And it's titled, Before a Man in the Midwest Loses a Lover. He thinks of those times he's been sick or drunk, desperate or wild with love. How human he is, scared, humbled before greatness so bright. He blinks its light away. His healthy body feels like a dead husk, while his beloved lies in a white hospital bed, cuffed to an IV. In Nebraska, where he can smell winter's fresh frost gusting across the gold fields, where some hearts are sprawling as the land, there ought to be a way for God to become more visible in the sweeping pink spray across the sky, more audible in the wind shaking loose leaves like a woman pulling her ponytail free. He has seen God's face, not in the crucifix nailed above the neighbor's door or in the lapsed sunsets. He's seen God in the squiggled veins of an old man's temples, in light that spills from a woman's crown as she kneels to help him pick up groceries. What if he went into a field right now, spread his arms and flapped them, or cawed like a madman in the almost rain, so the gray boulders of clouds rumbled aside? Maybe he'd hear the perfect answer as to why one more human life must be blown away in puffs. There will be no trees, just wind, to buffer his cries or carry them in the right direction. The prairie is calling, its dry mouth open wide. Okay, and the next one is titled Bungee Jumping, and this one is for those of you who have an ex who, in spite of yourself, you can think back to the occasional tender memory as much as you don't want to. Before the woman leaps off the 160-foot platform, she sees the tear-colored ghost of her body. Far below, a man watches from the ground. He is gracefully hauled, her sweaty backpack weighed down by novels and heavy crocheted dresses bought for her by the man before him. He has come this far, but will not ascend the platform to jump with her, despite her brief begging. He puts a bandana over his eyes, either to shield the heat or hide from his fear of what happens next. She calls down again for him to come up, but he won't. Whether he's too wise or weak remains to be seen. Whether she's careless or fearless is beside the point. The point is this: from that height, it's so bright she can see the city below her toes. Suddenly she's jarred back into her body that is my body, mine, and mine alone. Now I am back looking down at you, back to that time of perfect paralysis. It doesn't matter what sadness happened from there, how your pull exerted too much gravity. So instead, I looked at the assistant waiting behind me, and I just said, just push me, push me, push. Okay. And this one is titled, What Forever Means. For some lovers, it's two parallel lines drawn smoothly through time by God's hand until he can't keep his wrist steady, or his pen dries up so one of them runs out of ink. And one partner tries to pencil the other back to life, reads a story from her youth while she lies awake as a somber hospice hovers. For others, forever is two lives chiming together then ending, days apart, softly, as a bell with a broken tongue. Your once dashing father shrank into his couch beside your mother, unable to speak, aside from a blurred whisper. Alice, take me home. I want to die at home. And there's a woman somewhere whose husband tenderly pulls back her robe like a curtain to caress her twin mastectomy scars. So what does forever mean to us? Could it mean you at 70 and I at 50, taking your blood pressure, counting your pills? Or myself still nubile, never having been good? Leaving you for a younger man whose hands are a palm, forever could be you now, past middle age, yet handsome enough still to make women gape. Leaving me for the blonde postmistress in her convertible, and I never good as we've established, driving you to her. But could forever be us in 20 years, trundling our cart down the supermarket's bright aisles, still bonding over our dislike for croutons, still arguing over generic versus organic eggs. At night, still floating in bed, a tangle of limbs and torsos. As I'm asking you for permission I don't need to whisper into the confessional screen of your chest, while the sheets sail us into the smooth waves of sleep. Holding my waist like a mast, you struggle against the day's siren song that sings so loud it drowns out the question. So I can't ask you about forever, but instead allow it to linger in our air. Okay. This last one definitely speaks to not just our current climate, but today in particular, as we are doing some incredibly powerful and political things. This is a poem of hope, and it's titled Closer to the Light. A woman with cancer cells multiplying in her left breast wakes up 1 month later to feel they've dissolved. Her doctor confirms as she learns, speechless. It's gone. A man who spends half of his life at the nightclub, squandering his children's college tuition and betting women named Amy, rises one day, studies the flesh, pouching his eyes, and means it when he says, I've had enough. There's another man in Maine working in a shoe factory who hears a song on the radio and between notes has an epiphany so great that he puts on his hat, drives home and begins to write, begins to sing. So maybe, or maybe not, this world is mostly good, and your deepest fears might cleanse and heal. And sitting alone on the floor one night, you may be grieving the absence of a lover fighting overseas or a friend who refuses to die from a disease that singes his edge. or those who are being driven out, or lamenting the woman who was shot last week and the man another week before, and yet another unassuming city. So you flip off the TV, push open your window, and then walk outside. Everyone is lighting candles, another suspect taken into custody. And today, the world is on fire. The heat's so stifling, you're afraid you can't see it or take another breath. Yet that is how every hope is born. Formed from heat and pressure, it smolders and sends up smoke, which we read as saying help, and we do somehow. Let's help each other. We're here today, shoulder to shoulder, coughing, as we stand so close to the fire. But between breaths, still remember how beautiful it is to breathe.
That was Maria Nazos reading her poems Before a Man in the Midwest Loses a Lover, What Forever Means, Bungee Jumping, and Closer to the Light. Maria grew up in Joliet, Illinois, and Athens, Greece, but now lives in Lincoln. Her work has been published in places like The New Yorker, Tri-Quarterly, and World Literature Today. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you so much.
Coming up, we'll hear from the UNO Print Shop about their 50th anniversary. This is Friday Live on Nebraska Public Media. Award-winning chef and author Gabrielle Hamilton drifted away from her family. That's probably an understatement.
And this is indeed a book about a woman who can go years without communicating with either parent or her siblings, and boy, can she tell a story. And what a family. This isn't a Dickensian story of horrible physical or sexual abuse or neglect. Instead, it's about the impact of strong personalities who do brilliant things, yet remain unguided by any adults in the room.
Here, a review of Gabrielle Hamilton's honest and funny examination of her unusual family in her new memoir, Next of Kin. All About Books reviews are stored neatly online at nebraskapublicmedia.org/allaboutbooks on a digital shelf waiting for you. Support for programming on Nebraska Public Media comes from Abend Music, presenting the St. Olaf Choir, conducted by Anton Armstrong. With a history going back over 100 years, the 75-voice a cappella group will perform a concert on Saturday, January 31st at 7 p.m. Central in Lincoln's historic First Plymouth Church. Tickets are not required. Live stream available at abendmusic.org.
50 works, 50 artists, 50 years. That is an exhibition that opens up at the UNO Art Gallery, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the UNO Print Workshop, a hands-on collaborative printmaking program founded in 1976 by Thomas Majeski. The exhibition spans 5 decades of work, including alumni pieces and a founders showcase, and highlights how students and faculty have shaped the program. Joining me to talk about this and the celebration are Howard Payne, head of printmaking at UNO, and Dr. Rebecca Norris, gallery coordinator. Rebecca and Howard, it's great to have you with me on Friday Live.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yes, thank you.
Could you tell me about this founder of the Print Workshop, Thomas Majeski? Some of his work is on display as well, am I correct?
Yeah, Tom Majeski. Wow. He is also a UNO graduate. I believe 1960 graduated out of the program here. And then he went off to Iowa. And then he came back to teach and establish the print workshop. That developed out of this core kind of ethos of collaboration and experimentation that he was really attuned with. And so working with students, several of them who've gone on to create their own print workshop programs. He was kind of in that zeitgeist in the 70s. And so a couple of his students, Lloyd Menard, started the Frogman's Press. It's a workshop. And then you have Jim Butler with the New Press over at Illinois State University. And so he was kind of all part of that, and having been the instructor, but also being the student and very much collaborating with them and being influenced by them as well as an influencer. And so he was encouraged to start the print workshop, and that was established, as you said, in 1976.
With 50 years of printmaking to display, could the two of you talk me through the curation process? How did you decide what to show?
We began simply considering a chronological list, and it just seemed like it made sense to literally start at the beginning. Some of those first artists that were brought in were other trained printmakers, and I think that only enriched the discussion and the idea of how to expand this to invite in other artists who were not printmakers and not trained as printmakers, and just see how they react to creating an image that doesn't follow the rules and conventions that they're used to in the land of painting, and particularly oil painting.
Well, let's get into a little bit of that history and interaction between different kinds of styles, whether it's printmaking or other mediums. Like, Howard, you reference painters and having to work in a different way. Howard, you mix digital and traditional techniques in your own work. How does that shape maybe the way students work in the studio today at UNO?
Whether you're working digitally or whether you're working in a traditional printmaking process, I think one of the first things that you consider is how to consider things in layers and building up layers of information. What are you revealing? What are you concealing, layer by layer? And that can be done digitally in a program such as Photoshop, or it could be done in relief printing such as woodcut or linoleum block printing, lithography, screen printing, etching. All of these things generally work layer by layer. So it's a thinking process of how to build up information layer by layer. And generally that means color by color, because each linoleum block, woodcut, litho plate, they are all going to have generally one color on them. You start roughly from lightest color to darkest color. So introducing students to not thinking about making the whole thing all at once, but how to break that down into layers of information and how to successfully build those on top of each other so that you don't end up with visual and color mud.
And Rebecca, your academic work spans the gamut here, from Renaissance art all the way through to contemporary printmaking. How does your research affect the way that you see the work in this exhibition? What's your perspective?
I think it's super exciting to see how things developed and the connections, the relationships. And what I love out of the print workshop here is you have something that has sustained for over 50 years and is still going strong, which many programs have come, some have gone. And so having this footprint there in the middle of the U.S. that kind of serves as a heartbeat to that network across. You've got regional, national, international artists that have been pulled here, bringing those influences from where they're at, bringing them here, taking them back out, and just seeing that vibrancy and how that has made this, like, really put the stamp on the UNO print workshop.
I wonder if there were any moments in organizing the exhibition where you discovered a story about the artist or some sort of program or a print that really stuck with you?
Yes, because in speaking to Tom Majeski, who founded the program, is still with us. He's 92, and I have visited with him on a few occasions, and he is such a delight to speak with. And so what I'm finding with these works is the connectivity. I mean, it's a 1 to 2 degree of separation. I mean, would you say that's fair, Howard?
Absolutely. It was bring in an artist who knows another artist who can then be recommended to the UNO print workshop, and that just fed artist by artist for a number of years. And the sheer volume of artists that both Tom and Gary Day brought in is mind-boggling and exhausting when I think about how many people they would have brought in year by year. I have not been able to keep up with that speed. The print workshop is still absolutely active, but I am not bringing in 3 to 5 artists a year. I admire their efforts and am deeply impressed by them, but I am not working quite that hard.
Well, I think in a part, a lot of that is the cost effectiveness. Tom started this program with a grant that was just a little over $1,000. The university matched that. So imagine running a program on that much money this day and age. And so just sheer grit and curiosity, fortitude, they plowed onward. But it's the sustainability of something like that. Those are the honest challenges, I think, of this kind of program.
Oh, I know this is a little unfair to pick like a favorite child or something, but if there's one print that someone listening should definitely check out in the collection, what would it be and why?
That's not fair.
I know. Howard's like, that's totally not fair. Or is there maybe an example, a particular example of a technique or a combination of techniques, something like that?
Technique might be a little bit easier to talk about. And also there are multiple masters of techniques in this exhibition. Lloyd Menard doing multicolor etching. The print in the exhibition is absolutely magnificent. I would say the same thing about the multicolor print by Art Werger, another etching. It's a beautiful multicolor image of Times Square. And I think we would both be remiss to not mention that next week we have a visiting artist in from California, Matt Hobson Walker, who is a contemporary master of screen printing. And over the course of next week, we will be printing an edition in the print workshop, and that finished print will be unveiled at our opening reception on Friday the 6th.
Excellent. Well, lots to see in addition to those couple of works there at the UNO Print Workshop 50th Anniversary Exhibition. That is running now at the UNO Art Gallery in the Weber Fine Arts Building. And as mentioned, there's a group conversation coming up on Thursday, February 5th from noon to 1. A reception and print workshop open house on Friday, February 6th. That's from 5 to 7. And of course, for more information about this, you can always visit the Friday Live page at nebraskapublicmedia.org. My guests here today are Howard Payne and Rebecca Norris, faculty at UNO. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk with me about printmaking and about the 50th anniversary there at UNO.
Thank you for having us.
And we look forward to welcoming you in the gallery.
Still to come on Friday Live, hear our guest Daniel Donato trying to find what cosmic country is and learn about Norfolk artist Mike Lynch's creative process. This week on the Friday Live Extra, we spoke to Ed Love and Scott Vicroy of Group Sax.
There are classical saxophone quartet, but not so much in the jazz world. And so the two groups that caught my ear way back in those years were Bobby Watson's 29th Street Sax Quartet. And then there was an English group around the same time called Itchy Fingers.
Learn about their upcoming show, how the quartet composes and arranges, how two members got their start on saxophone, and even learn a little about the bassoon. Support for programming on Nebraska Public Media comes from St. Paul United Methodist Church, based in the heart of downtown Lincoln. Worship services take place on Sundays at 10 a.m. and 5 p.m., in person or online. All are loved and welcome here. Learn more at stpaulumc.org.
Daniel Donato began his musical career busking on the streets of Nashville's famous Lower Broadway at the age of 14. Eventually, invited to play with the local Don Kelly Band, Donato played and then fell in love with country music. Now, after releasing his second studio album, Horizons, in August of 2025, he is bringing his cosmic country back to Lincoln. I am joined by Daniel Donato. How are you doing today?
Very well. How are you?
I'm good. Daniel, for those who are just hearing about you, Cosmic Country is the band you play with, but it's also used to describe your sound. What is Cosmic Country, and does that definition change over time?
Yeah, I think, like how the definition of truth or love changes in your life over time, but it's always something that is always present. Cosmic Country has that same bandwidth as well, because it's imbued by those same values, by truth and love. And so Cosmic Country is always changing because it's living. And that's what makes this approach to music so spiritual.
So is it more the content of the lyrics? Would you say that the sound overall is straight up country? Is that where the cosmic part is in the lyrics, I guess is what I'm asking?
The cosmic part, in some songs, there's some cosmically seeking lyrics. And then in some songs, there's some country-facing lyrics like Off Horizons, Better Deal Blues, and like Blame the Train, Sunshine in the Rain. Those are very, country-based lyrics. Oh, bless your soul, but damn your words that burned right into lies. That could be a Hank Williams lyric, But then there are also cosmic lyrics as well. As we walk this dimension and mind our intention, let go with all your might. There's like the classic cosmic essence of a duality and an as above, so below in some of those lyrics. The only thing that's one size fits all for Cosmic Country is that we attempt to be truthful. That's really the only thing that's persistent throughout all of it. Everything else is subject to change, and objects in the mirror are closer than they appear.
Fair enough. Well, so last time you came through Lincoln, it was September of 2022, and you were at the Zoo Bar, and now you're playing a slightly larger venue around the corner. What has changed for you as a musician over those years since 2022?
Well, every time I've had a chance to be on stage since that fabled night at the Zoo Bar on Tuesday. I remember it was a Tuesday and it was a sold out show in Lincoln, Nebraska. And all of us were just gobsmacked at that turnout. That was such a beautiful gift for us to receive. And we're looking forward to returning that on this upcoming tour. But so every time I've been on stage since that night, which has been, over 300 times, I have all those experiences with me. So everywhere that I've been, every song that has been played and every person that I've connected with is with me in a cosmic sense now. So I would say quite a difference. Quite a difference.
Your newest album, Horizons, is your second full length of original compositions. How do you write the music that eventually ends up on your album?
I think I'm accountable for a percentage of the music. Some of the songs I write fully on my own. Some of the songs, they're in a place to where you can cook them in the oven with everyone in my band, with Sugar Leg and Bronco and Mustang. And part of our process, too, is we play songs live before we record them most of the time, a lot for a long period of time. And we give them time to change and develop. But something that I really love about what we do is we're essentially open source with our music. We play our music at shows before they go onto records. We give away the shows on audio before 48 hours passes of us playing the show. And so essentially everything we're doing, we're showing our work in progress, and everybody has access to it pretty much all the time. I like that. I think that's a necessary modality of engagement with the community in 2026 and onward, just given all the technological luxuries that we have now.
It's interesting to me because, there's those artists who will come out with something new. Their sound will change a little bit. They'll be growing and developing as musicians. And sometimes the audience is like, oh, no, I don't like this new album. They changed from that first album or that first sound. But you're really taking a completely different approach by being so open with the development of your music. You record those live concerts. You put them out on Bandcamp. I wonder what your thoughts are about audience members and how involved they are then with your process.
Yeah, I think a lot about this. In Cosmic Country, we don't have a standard amount of importance that we assign to our community and our audience. They really are first. We're a community-focused living music experience. I feel humble towards change. The humbleness that I feel is something that I feel responsible to do. So a band, an artist is always changing and all is brought to light. So you might as well share in that change. I have friends and also artists that I'm not friends with, but I admire that the way they express change is they'll play a tour, they'll go away, they'll kind of go, into hibernation or something. So it speaks for a period of time, and then all the content gets deleted off their page. They get a haircut, they change their album. The album's very different, and there's that, kind of a Freudian 180, so to speak. I've seen that executed very well and played very well. It's just not my bag. My bag is I just want to change in real time with everybody. Because if we can all share in the vulnerability of changing together, then the period of time in which we can change together and stay connected together is grown. It's much like that of a family. Everyone changes before everyone's very eyes, lovingly and honestly, through our faults and through our triumphs.
Well, you have an opportunity to connect here with my guest, Daniel Donato. He is going to be at the Bourbon Theater in Lincoln. That is tomorrow. Doors are open at 7 p.m. and music is set to start at 8 p.m. Daniel, such a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you, Genevieve. Thank you for your fantastic questions. I look forward to connecting again in the future.
And if you want more information about Cosmic Country or anything that you hear about this week is related to arts and culture, find the Friday Live page. That's on our website at nebraskapublicmedia.org. Larry Lynch was born in rural Nebraska and raised in small towns around Iowa. All the while, he was making art. After going to college for painting, Lynch landed back in Nebraska, eventually heading the art department at Northeast Community College in Norfolk. From now on, through March 18th, his art can be seen at Wayne State College's Nordstrom Visual Arts Gallery, just 31 minutes kind of northeast, I guess you could say. We're joined here by Mike Lynch now. How's it going, Mike? Good to talk to you.
Good. Thanks for having me.
The exhibition at Wayne State is called More Love. Where does that name come from? And could you tell us a bit about your art being featured there?
The show, it's kind of a collection of paintings from the past 5 years. And so what I tend to work on, I tend to work from direct observation, and I tend to just paint in a single session. So what that does, it kind of forces me to be present and in the moment, and also just forces me to paint whatever is around. And so then I just kind of paint all those things that are just kind of ordinary objects or just people that I love, places that I'm at. And so that forces me to kind of appreciate the little things in life and try to be there. And so that's kind of where the title came from, was just trying to focus on the good that's there. And, you know, if you watch the news, it just about breaks your heart. And so if anything, I think there's pretty good reason to have a little more love.
I don't know if you refer to it like this, Mike, but it kind of sounds like a flow state that you put yourself into when you're working.
Yeah, maybe you've heard First Thought, Best Thought, Allen Ginsberg, beat writer. And so that kind of plays a role a little bit because I kind of go by a kind of initial reaction. But then kind of going beyond that, and I think Allen Ginsberg would have also said, is you want to think it through a little more. So sometimes I follow my heart, but sometimes follow my head and see where that takes you. But yeah, like a stream of consciousness, or being open to that and then kind of responding. Sometimes I might just put a mark on there and see if I can live with that mark or not, and then try to keep building with that and see if I can get away with it or not. Like if the whole thing can start to connect and all the unrelated parts start to come together in a whole. And I'll try to do that almost like freestyle, or, like in jazz music or something. You just start kind of putting things down and just responding. Nothing better than when you drag a brush across and it says multiple things like space and light and color and atmosphere, just by dragging that lump of paint across. My wife calls it art brain. After I'm done painting, sometimes I can't quite speak right, or she doesn't think I should drive a car or anything, because you just get so into it, I think, and you tap into that other side of your brain, the creative side of your thinking. And I think that prepares you to think in a new way, to see in a new way, and to respond as you work, because you've kind of gone to that place, that zone, or that art brain or whatever. I think that's really important in the process, to be open to that process, open to that possibility, open to that present moment.
This is great insight into you as an artist and your process. What are your thoughts about what viewers are saying when they look at your artwork? What do you hope you're conveying to them?
Well, I hope first it's a visual statement, because it's kind of a formal visual communication. So I hope it strikes them visually first. And that's primarily my angle, or where I come in from, as a painter, my background especially. So it's primarily the form, I think, and painting in the context of painting. So maybe thinking about, I have this painting in front of me here, but does it kind of remind you of somebody else, or is there another artist, or building on like a history of painting, a lineage maybe of primarily coming from probably a French figurative tradition, I suppose.
What role did your upbringing play in what you like to do with your art?
So when I was a little kid there in rural Iowa, there wasn't a whole lot of artwork around, but we did get the Des Moines Register every day. And on the front cover, there was a political cartoonist named Frank Miller, who had every day to have a political cartoon on the front center of the front page. And then on Sundays, they'd have a color reproduction of his work. And that Sunday one was usually a scene around Iowa, typically. He'd go out and do little watercolor studies of different areas across the state. And as a little kid, I just loved to see those images. So when I was about 10 years old, I approached the local newspaper and asked if they'd let me do a weekly political cartoon. And they did. And I did that through my time in school. That was really a great experience, because it really taught me like how to develop a discipline and how to keep working, and to keep looking at other artists and keep trying to find my own mark and stuff. I still kind of think about that. So like even today in my work, I do have this kind of painterly figurative thing going on, but then I do think about line the way you might see in a political cartoon or in a cartoon. And so I try to incorporate line with brushstroke and color. And then I do also use text. I tend to kind of not only put my name on it, like say Frank Miller would have signed his cartoon, but also like a caption, say like in Charlie Brown, how when they're writing a letter or they're writing a paper for school or a letter to Santa, the text is above their head, and how that creates that weird space. It's kind of between the physical space and the thought and their mind, and there's these multiple layers of kind of implied space. So I love that notion of like putting some text in with the image to create these layers of plastic space, which I think then turns into kind of a formal or visual tension between image and text.
I'm glad you brought up your writing, Mike, because the last thing I wanted to ask you was not only you an artist, you write poetry, you're also a musician, having played in a band called Hannah's Porch.
Oh, yeah, in the 90s, yeah.
Do you see those forms of self-expression as similar or different, or do they all interplay, kind of like you're talking about the words mixing with your visual arts?
Oh, yeah. I love that notion of how they're just taking on slightly different forms, but they're all part of that creative process. And, it's kind of almost like a magical thing when you just start making marks on the canvas and this thing starts to emerge, whatever it is, even if it's non-objective abstraction or if it's a dog or whatever, And the same with music. Sometimes, you pick up, like I happen to play guitar, and I'll just pick that up. And, you might play a chord or play it in a different place up the neck, or then you might play it incorrectly, and then think, hey, well, that's pretty weird, and then you just keep messing with it. And then all of a sudden, then I tend to put haikus into the song. And, and so then it's all these things are coming together, and it just seems, I feel like I'm hardly even there sometimes, I feel like these things are just happening and I just happen to be a conduit or something, Yeah, I do see them all kind of related a lot. I do think they just happen to be taking different forms, but I feel like it's that same kind of creative energy, playing with that energy.
Well, my guest here is Michael Larry Lynch, himself a conduit for creativity, self-described. His recent work is in More Love, which is at Wayne State College's Nordstrom Visual Arts Gallery. It's up there through March 18th, and the gallery has hours Monday through Friday. There's also a few hours on Saturday, 3 to 7 p.m. Again, Mike Lynch, thank you so much for chatting with me. This has been a fun conversation.
Oh, thank you. Just wonderful. Appreciate it.
And you can find more details about this art exhibition on the Friday Live page. Our website is nebraskapublicmedia.org.
Coming up this morning on Nebraska Public Media, music from Nebraska's stages on Nebraska Concerts, hosted by Laura Black. And this afternoon, I'm celebrating the weekend and bringing you classics by request starting at 1 Central. Be sure to visit the Nebraska Public Media website for podcasts of our show at nebraskapublicmedia.org. Portions of Friday Live are pre-recorded. Our theme music was written and performed by Alexios Anist. Friday Live is not possible without the collaboration of Brendan Rook, Phoenix Carroll, KJ Tedder, Cole McEwen, and associate producer Arthur Jones. I'm Penelope Morrow.
Everything we do at Nebraska Public Media is possible only with members who donate. This podcast version of our weekly radio show Friday Live, podcasts of our television show Backyard Farmer, and so much more. All of it is thanks to donors, underwriters, and other private support. You can support Nebraska Public Media online at nebraskapublicmedia.org.